are we doing? Okay, something interesting for today. For a change.
It's always interesting.
So, this is the parsha. You know this parsha. This is the parsha that I'm so happy you're here. I was just telling your father how excited I am that you come every week. I just did like a whole PTA, like there was. I would tell him more often, but even though we're next door neighbors, we hardly see each other. So we happen to be at the same meeting, actually, both of us at the same meeting this week, so I had a chance to schmooze with him. Anyway, so this is that week, that week that we stopped teaching Parsha. Right? This is the week that we stop teaching Parsha. And it's convenient because it comes out before Purim. So we could do the story of Purim, followed by the story of Pesach, followed by Sfirah, Talmidei Rabbi Akiva, Lag BaOmer, Shavuos, graduation. Right? That's the way it goes, right? So, I'm sorry?
Don't push it.
So, the point is that when it comes to Parshas Mishpatim, we're not telling the story of the Parsha anymore. And I understand why. I'm not saying this in a critical way. It's hard to explain to children the halachas of a ganev and a gazlan and the dinim of someone who digs a pit and what happens if you own a slave and if you find that and if you're allowed to kill a ganev that breaks into your house at night. I don't think that's kindergarten material, So we tell the stories of Bereshis through Mishpatim, and then we switch to other things. And I understand that. I do have this pet peeve about the fact that we don't teach the stories in Chumash Bamidbar. I always mention it in the summer, when it's warm. I always mention in the summer that the stories of Bamidbar are fundamental stories. You know why? Because the stories in Chumash, there's a ton of stories there. If it was during the school year, we would teach them. The stories in Bamidbar are stories where the Yidden make mistakes. And HaKadosh Baruch Hu loves them anyway. They're very important stories. It's very important. But anyway, unfortunately, we don't teach those stories. The Meraglim, Bilam, the whole story of Bilam, the Nachash Anachayshes. There's all kinds of stories that would be nice. It would be nice for our children to hear the stories firsthand, how the Torah teaches us that we don't have to be perfect. Maybe it would prevent us from raising generations of perfectionists. Maybe. But in any event, Parshas Mishpatim, the stories are over. Right? But we're not children. And for us, it's something to think about that we're transitioning in this week's parsha, in a sense, from the stories to the dinim, right? More or less, we're going from the stories to the halachas. We know that the Torah is full of halachas. There are 613 mitzvahs, and in those 613 mitzvahs are many, many halachas. Like there's a mitzvah of sukkah, but it has many halachas in it. A mitzvah of Shabbos, but it has many halachas. And Parshas Mishpatim is starting to learn the halachas. And we know the function of everything that we learned until now. We know that the function of the Parshiyos until now were because that is our Emunah. Avram Avinu, Yitzchak, Yaakov, the Shvatim, going down to Mitzrayim, the Makos, Yitzias Mitzrayim, Kriyas Yamsuf, Matan Torah. We know that those are the building blocks of who we are. Last week, Parshas Yisro, there's something exciting about it. It was the week of the giving of the Torah. It's exciting. We heard the Aseres HaDibros in Shul. Something exciting about it. Something smelled like cheesecake a little bit, Some exciting Shavuos vibes. We were getting the Torah that week. Now that we're switching into the halachas, I thought that perhaps tonight, just to do something a little bit interesting, we would talk about how to appreciate the halachas part of the Torah. Because here's what I find. I find that very often we follow halacha, but that's not where we find the beauty of our Yiddishkeit. We find the beauty of our Yiddishkeit in Shabbos. I don't mean in keeping the halachas of Shabbos. I just mean in the Zmiras of Shabbos, or in the Chesed that we do, which is a big mitzvah. Or we sing, we learn about bitachon. There's other ways that we feel like, oh, it's so wonderful to be a Yid, but in the actual technical keeping of the halachas, we look at that as like the technical part of being a Yid. The technical parts, It took my wife a while to get used to that. Now this comes from learning the sugyas as well, but that if someone comes to ask me a shaila, like if it's like a nice, unique shaila, instead of getting all worried, like, oh no, what's the answer? I'm like, that's a good shaila. I love that shaila. That's great. Like, okay, what's the answer? I have no idea. It's just such a good question. Like, if you know the dinim, this question is just so unique and interesting. Like, when you're learning, you learn to appreciate the details of the dinim. So, I'll give you an example, just something interesting, okay? I'll give you an example. We'll talk in learning a little bit. Don't tell anyone, okay? So there are different types of categories of damagers in the Torah, okay? Different types of categories. So there's an for example, an animal that's mazik, right? That's one type. You could have an animal that's mazik. You could have a burr, right? If you dig a pit or if you leave a banana peel on the floor, it would be like a classic example. You leave a michsho where someone could fall and hurt themselves or break something. You have a person does damage. A person hits someone or breaks something of someone's. And you have fire. Someone is irresponsible with fire and it spreads to his friend's house. And these things are not foreign things. These things could happen today also. Whose responsibility is it? Such a thing could come up. The Thaylors and I are neighbors. We're neighbors for many years. So our backyards go up against each other. There are 1,000 shilas that could happen. And in town, sometimes these shilas happen. What happens if the Thaylors have a tree that gets berries in the summer? And the branch goes over into my backyard. It doesn't, but it goes over into my backyard, and it drops berries onto the floor of my backyard, which gets my grandchildren full of berry mush. So do I have a right to insist that he cut the branch down? Whose job is it to do that? Or what if it had delicious fruits hanging from it? Whose fruits are they? So these things come up today, these halachas of damages and reshuyas and things like that. But anyway, just to give you an example of the enjoyment of it, just interesting. There was a story in Yerushalayim a couple of years ago, where this is like a classic, like a classic. It's such a classic, you can't believe it actually happened, that someone delivered to a bakery salt instead of sugar. And the baker baked all of the day's pastries and donuts and rugelach and everything using salt instead of sugar. Now, it must have been the baker was half asleep, because even I know that salt and sugar don't have the same consistency. But kachava, this is what happened. Okay? Needless to say, everything was ruined. They went to Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach, Zecher Tzadik Livracha. They said, who's liable, and what is he liable for? The guy delivered the salt. Did I put the salt into your rugelach? You did that. Why should I be chayiv? Is the baker chayiv? Who's chayiv here? So Rav Shlomo Zalman, who knows the Masechtas and the Mishnayos and the Psukim and the Rishonim and the Shulchan Aruch backwards and forwards, he's reported to have said that the guy that delivered it is chayiv. The person that made the mistake of substituting salt and sugar is chayiv. Why is he chayiv? He said, very interesting, he said it's like a fire. When you have a fire, so it's a damaging thing, and it just spreads to other things and damages them. By the time it does the damage, it's very far away from where you left it. But the natural thing is that a little bit of wind, a little breeze, and it spreads and spreads, and it burns things. So he said, you put down this salt, and then the natural thing happened. The baker took it and put it where he puts the sugar, because he thought it said sugar on it. So he put it where he puts the sugar, and then it was the natural movement of the salt, like fire, and destroying everything in its path. So he said it's like fire. So anyway, these are like the types of dinim of Parshas Mishpatim. But I think it's important for us to take a step back and to appreciate from the foundation what it means that we do mitzvahs. Something that we know from the time that we're young. We do mitzvahs. We keep the Torah. We follow halacha. But I think that sometimes we could lose sight of like what it means that we keep mitzvahs. And I want to tell you a small idea that the Maharal says in the beginning of his Sefer. The Maharal wrote a Sefer called Tiferes Yisrael. Tiferes Yisrael means like the crown, the glory, the beauty of Klal Yisrael. And it's about the Torah. And he writes there towards the beginning of the Sefer something very interesting. He says, everything that was created in this world has certain tchunas, it has certain midas. And what it accomplishes in this world is a reflection of those midas. So, let's say some animals have claws, and they're very agile, so they can climb. So what do? They climb. Fire is hot. So what does it do? It burns things, or heats things, or warms things, right? And water is cooler, and so on. Each thing, if you look at what it's made up of, it acts using its attributes. A cow could do many things. A cow could help in the field. It could produce milk, or it could also produce meat. And that's what cows do. Every cow doesn't do all of those things. But the Gemara says some cows are miyuchad for shchita, some cows are miyuchad for milk production. A chicken could provide us with chicken. It could provide us with eggs at $100 an egg, and that's what chickens do. That's what they're capable of doing, and that's what they do. If you would take anything in this world, I'm saying a very simple thing. If you take anything in this world and look at it, you'll be able to see what its midas are, what its attributes are, what its abilities are, and therefore what it does. Okay, very simple concept, right? Fine, let's take a mirror and let's look at ourselves. We have certain tremendous similarities to animals. We can eat and we can drink and we can sleep and we can do all the things that animals can do. We do also. But there's a whole part of us that's different than everything in the animal kingdom. And that is, we have a neshama. We have an intellect that's capable of doing more. And he says, and don't tell me that the reason for that we have that neshama is so that we can make a living. Because, you need to be smart to make a living, right? You have to be able to do things. To sew, to bake, to build, to do all the things that human beings do to make a parnasa and to survive. We have to use our intellect. You take a person that doesn't have any abilities and you put them down on a desert island, they will die. But if you take someone who has abilities, who has intelligence, and you put them down, then they will survive. He says that can't be why man has superior intelligence, so that he could survive. He says because that was never the plan. When Adam Arishon was created and put in Gan Eden, Hashem prepared everything for him. Bread would grow on trees, it says in Chazal. He didn't have to plow and plant and thresh and grind, and he didn't have to do those things. Hashem, the Malachim, made him clothing. He didn't have to start figuring out, to get cotton or wool and to spin it and to weave it. He didn't have to do those things. That's a result of the fact that Adam Arishon did a chet. and Chava did a chet, and therefore, therefore we are forced to work hard for our parnasa. It can't be the reason Hashem gave you intellect is so that you could make a parnasa. It was never the plan. That's part of the chet of Adam, that we have to make a parnasa. We were created to serve Hashem. We were not created to sustain ourselves. Am I making sense here?
Mm-hmm.
So the Maharal says, so why do we have a neshama? What's it for? Everything in this world, look at what it does. We went to the aquarium during some point, I think maybe during vacation. We went to have you been to the aquarium, Norwalk Aquarium? Mm-hmm. You haven't been there? Mm-hmm. Go. Mm-hmm. It's nice. What?
Yeah, it's fun.
It's nice. So there's a thing there where you get to see the sharks swimming. You're under, there's a big floor-to-ceiling tank, and you watch the sharks swim by. It's frightening. Okay, it's frightening. They're frightening animals. Okay, the kids aren't frightened because they don't chap, but we're frightened, And the kids like banging on the glass. You're like, don't bang that hard, But you look at the sharks, and they swim with you could see their teeth, rows of large, sharp teeth. It's frightening. Do you know what sharks do? They have tons of sharp teeth. See if you can figure it out. What do? They tear apart fish that they attack so that they can eat it with their sharp teeth. Anything you see on an animal, you will figure out what the animal does. If you see that a lion has the ability with its claws to tear something apart, that is why when lions are hungry, they attack an animal and they tear it apart. There are videos out there. You can watch it. Okay? Birds have these appendages attached to them. You ever notice them? They go like that. Okay? That means that they could fly. So what do birds do? They fly. Okay? This is not a difficult concept. We are human beings. We have a neshama, a higher intellect, an ability to appreciate spirituality. Why do we have that? Forget about it. No, there's a part of us that we're not using. Why do we have it? Why do we have a neshama? The Maharal says, of course, we have a neshama because we are supposed to be living a godly life. Certainly. If everything in this entire world that you look at, observe the world, it uses its attributes to function and to survive, one of our attributes is that we have a capacity for spirituality, for ruchnius. Why? He says it has to be that we were placed on this world to bring ruchnius into this world. That's who we are. To live, that just as, the outside, our bodies, that's the animal part of us. It's an interesting note, by the way. It may bother you to hear me say that. The animal part of us, we're human beings. How can you say that? It's very interesting. There's a Pachad Yitzchak somewhere that says that, it does say in Chazal, it says in the Psukim also, that there's such a thing as the light of someone's face. Have you heard that? Ma'or panim, the light of someone's face. Or like you see a big tzaddik, you say he has a hadras panim, right? He has there's like a shine to him. Not just Moshe Rabbeinu, but there's such a thing as a shine. There's a phrase, chachmas adam, the wisdom of a person, ta'ir panav, it lights up his face. So Rav Hutner wrote somewhere that the face, listen to this, okay? You're not expecting what I'm about to say. The face is the weakest part of the body. What? Because it's the place that fails to hide the light of the neshama. It's the place that the light of the neshama shines through. So I'm saying our bodies are the animal part of us. Obviously, you look into the eyes of another human being and you see a neshama. Of course, you see a person. I'm not saying that we're a bunch of grazing cows. Of course. Our neshamas are obvious on us. Of course. But the external body that we have, that's the animal part of us. That's the part of us that does the things that animal does. But Hashem blew into us a capacity for ruchnius and neshama. And just as Hashem filled us with a neshama, The Gemara says this. I don't know why we teach sometimes, or we think that the neshama is like this little floating, white, glowing thing that goes into our heart. You ever have that idea? It's a mistake. The neshama, Chazal say, is memale es kol haguf. It fills the whole body. We are filled with neshama. In fact, by the way, okay, I did not expect to do this, but I'm having so much fun. We'll do it anyway. In fact, I want to tell you something interesting. Moshe Rabbeinu stands in front of Hashem for the first time, the burning bush. What does Hashem tell him to do? Take off his shoes. Shal ne'olecha me'al raglecha. Take off your shoes. Why? What's take off your shoes? Say the Sfarim say that the neshama of a person is massive. The neshama of a person goes all the way up to the Kisei HaKavod. Okay? Our bodies are tiny compared to our neshamas. They're tiny. The tail end, the very bottom, the lowest part of our neshama is infused into our guf. But as great as your neshama makes you, your real neshama really is by Hashem. It goes all the way up to Hashem. We are massive giants walking around. Halavai, we could see ourselves that way. We are giants of Ruchnias walking around. When Hashem spoke to Moshe, Hashem wanted to tell Moshe that his body should step aside and let his neshama stand in front of Hashem. Just as the neshama uses the body like a shoe, the very bottom half part of the neshama is connected to this world. So as a mashal for removing the neshama from the guf, Moshe took his shoes off. Shalna alecha me'al raglecha. So when I say the neshama fills the guf, yes, it does that, but so much more. But just like the neshama fills our guf, so too our job is to fill our physical life with a godly way of life, to live in a godly way, in a spiritual way. Okay, thank you very much. How am I supposed to do that? What am I supposed to do? And unfortunately, you find out there sometimes people trying to dream up on their own how they're supposed to live a godly life. But we are very, very, very fortunate because Moshe Rabbeinu stood on Har Sinai and HaKadosh Baruch Hu told him exactly how to live a godly life. And that is through the mitzvahs of the Torah. In fact, I want to tell you something else. Remember I was talking about the birds have these appendages on their shoulders and that they could make the bird fly, and indeed, the birds fly. Now, Mrs. Hack, I know they're going to be very surprised to hear this, but birds do not go to high school to learn how to fly or to college. They actually instinctively, as they develop, they learn how to fly. And all animals, they do their thing without being taught. Nobody teaches them. They're in the wild, and they just do their thing. It's amazing, right? So if we have a neshama, why don't we naturally serve Hashem in a godly way? Why isn't it our natural instinct to live a godly life? Says the Maharal, because Hashem also created something called the Yetzer Hara. And the Yetzer Hara blocks the light of the neshama. And it doesn't allow us to see our natural netiya, our natural happiest way of living, most satisfying way of life, which is to live this godly way of life. But our job is to overcome the Yetzer Hara, to work with the Yetzer Hara, so that we can live that life that our neshama is begging to live. And that's why we're not happy, by the way. This is why we are not happy when we're not living a spiritual life. We're just not happy. The reason we're not happy is because we were created for this. If there are parts of you that you don't use, you're not satisfied. You're just not satisfied. You want to use who you are. And that's a big bracha when HaKadosh Baruch Hu allows a person to use all of his or her midas or talents or abilities that Hashem gave them. If a person can't do that, a person feels very limited. our ruchnius is a very major part of who we are. It's maybe the most major part of who we are. If we're not accessing our ruchnius, we may not realize why we're feeling so limited, but we're feeling very, very limited. So that's what the mitzvahs are. And when we follow the mitzvahs, the challenge is that we don't often feel that or understand why it's true. Okay? And this is true with mitzvahs that we do. This is true with mitzvahs that are miyuchad, specific for men, mitzvahs that are specific for women, that sometimes we're not connecting the fact that we're doing those mitzvahs with the fact that this is the way that we live a life that's higher, that's transformative, that's not a regular physical life. You know, a woman gets ready to leave her house or her room, and she covers her hair. So that's something that is a Mesiras Nefesh. And for most women that do it at this point, they don't think that much about it. But it's a Mesiras Nefesh, and it's not comfortable, and it could be very hot in the summer, or even in the winter when we're trying to be very warm. It could make it even warmer, and it's not comfortable. And Baruch Hashem, we live in a world where women aren't, some women out there are, but we live in a world where, in our communities, women aren't pushing against it, and they're not struggling with it. This is what I do. But how much more powerful would it be if we were able to do those mitzvahs with a sense that this is how I live a godly life? And the problem is that we don't understand the connection in all of the things that we do between putting on my hot sheitel and living a godly life. We don't see how they connect. And that's the challenge that we have. It takes a lot of emunah, and it could be corrected by learning properly, by learning things. But we don't necessarily see it. There's a big challenge. Many people have a challenge that they don't like Shabbos. Younger people have it more than older people. But the younger people that we used to say 5-10 years ago have struggled with Shabbos, they're married now, right? And they struggle with Shabbos. We live in a generation that struggles with Shabbos because we live in a very bored generation. We struggle very much, more than our parents did, to keep our children occupied. It's a makas hadar. It's a difficult thing that there's no such a thing as telling your kids, we're just going to hang around a little bit. There's no such a concept, right? My vision of it, I've said this over before, is going on a Chalamite trip with your kids, putting all of your kaiches into it, traveling the Norwalk Aquarium where you're going to visit, and traveling and putting food in. No matter what yontif it is, it's complicated. My wife was saying that midwinter vacation, you could eat out of the sukkah chametz. She was like, it's amazing, But anyway, so you travel, you're packing the bags and everything. You go out onto the trip, and what happens as you're walking through the door 7 or 8 exhausted hours later? Like, what should we do? You're like, I don't know. I'm thinking about, I don't want to do anything, actually. That's what I'm thinking. We're bored, and we have technology. So our kids, as they get older, they're used to occupying themselves during the week. That constant need to be occupied is met, maybe also caused by, but met by this thing that constantly occupies us. And then Shabbos comes, and we put it down. And even adults sometimes are very bored. And for me to say, no, you're living a godly life. Shabbos, the mitzvah of Shabbos. It's true, and it's even a chizuk to hear it if you understand it the way we just presented it. But it's hard when we don't see the connection. So when we don't see or feel the connection with that, it makes it more difficult. And that's why it's always a good idea to try to see what we could do to learn the meaning of mitzvahs, to learn what it is, what Shabbos is, what Tznius is, what Hilchas Lashon Hara is, what Tefillah is, what even Choshen Mishpat, like what should I do if there are berries falling into my yard. But what these mean, what these mitzvahs represent, would be a very valuable thing to learn. But this shir is not about that. This shir is about the fact that it's not easy to do that. Many of us don't have the time to do that, the access to do that, the ability to do that. And if I could do it with one mitzvah, I can't do it with all the mitzvahs. And I'm still living a frum life, which means that over the day, 30, 40, 50, 60 times, I'm living differently than the guy next door. I'm doing something different. The way I act, the way I dress, the way I act at home, the way I act with my children, the way my house is, the way I cook, the way I eat. I'm doing all these things differently, keeping my milchiks and fleishik separate. And if this spoon goes into this pot, crisis in the kitchen, we have to call a rav. And then all these things that we do, that we live, and it's difficult to start finding that shear on Basar B'Chalav that explains chesed and din and the mixture. It's very hard to do that. What we need to do is, we need to start with a sense that when we do a mitzvah, we know we're plugging into a godly life. Just that knowledge that we're following what Hashem said and we're plugging into something that lifts us up like a bird has wings and it flies. I have a neshama and I live the life of a neshama person. And you know something? We do this. I want to tell you something. Wow, it's amazing. This chair is not working out the way I planned it, but it doesn't matter. I want to tell you something. A very, very interesting thing. There's a Gemara that when it's discussing the brachas that we make on the shofar, the Gemara has a possibility, it rules against it, but it has a possibility that you don't have to make a bracha on the shofar because you blow a tekiah before you blow the sounds of the shofar. In other words, if you remember, I know Rosh Hashanah was a while ago, but if you remember, every sound that the shofar makes is sandwiched between two tekiyahs. Do you remember that? So you have tekiah, shvarim, tekiah, shvarim, trua, tekiah, trua, tekiah. But what's the same about all the blows is that they start with a tekiah and they end with a tekiah. What's a tekiah? A tekiah is a long sound. A long, straight, simple sound. It's not broken up. It's not fancy. It's just a pashut. It's called a pshuta. It's called pashut. It's a simple, long sound. The Gemara says that that's like a bracha beforehand. Why? So someone once explained that when you say a bracha before you do a mitzvah, you say Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu. Hashem made us holy. He gave us that neshama. And he was mekadesh us with his mitzvahs, and he commanded us to do this mitzvah. That when we say that, what we're saying is, I know there's 1,000 reasons for this mitzvah. And I know that there's a huge depth to the mitzvah. And I know that probably if I would research it, I could find books, volumes, encyclopedias about this mitzvah. But that's not why I'm doing the mitzvah. You know why I'm doing the mitzvah? Asher Kiddishanu b'mitzvaysav v'tzivanu. It's a simple Kabbalas oil. Simple, like that tekiah before. It's a simple Kabbalas oil. I'm doing the mitzvah because Hashem commanded me, and I know that this is the way of expressing my neshama in this world. I don't know why I'm putting on a sheitel. I don't know all the dinims and the back and forth, and there are people that could philosophize about it. I don't know if that helps them or not, from today till tomorrow. But I do it because that's what I do to live a godly life. Because I know that that's what I do to live a godly life. And when I keep my milchiks and fleishik separate, yeah, it's possible that if I looked on Torah any time, I could find some shiurim that explain the depth of the way we run our kitchen. Possibly. But I don't need that. I need to know that I am following the halachas, and that is my way of plugging in to this not natural, not olam hazeh way of life, of filling my life with neshama. And everything that we do, from washing negel vaser in the morning to saying Shema before we go to sleep at night, every piece of what we do is building this Seder HaChaim, our whole life. You ever realize, like, those of you that work with non-Jews can appreciate this. Sometimes people are frustrated by it. That there's like it doesn't work. Our lives can't work together. You ever realize that? We can't live with non-Jews. It just doesn't work. There's just so much different. There's such a different way of life, a different Seder HaChaim, a different way of living. It's so dramatically different. Just think about it. You open your eyes in the morning, and there's a guy down the block, a woman your age, opening her eyes in the morning. Any similarity? Okay, there are certain basic similarities. If she has children and you have children, so you're worrying about your children, whatever. There are certain human similarities. But you're like, okay, I have to wash Negelasser, say my Da'ani. They're just like the whole, I get shilas, my son didn't wash Negelasser and he touched food. What should I do with the food? Try to explain that to your neighbor. Try to explain that one. What? Yeah. There's just such how much should I daven? How much should a woman daven? I don't know, how much should I daven? And I'm working on it. And okay, what are them? I don't know, maybe it was even from someone here. I don't know. So I don't have time to daven anymore. The only time I have to daven is in the car. Is it okay to daven while I'm driving? If I'm davening while I'm driving, which parts of tefillah should I say? Okay, go get to work and explain to your coworkers that you were struggling with that. Okay? Or that, Purim is coming and you're trying to figure out Shalach Manis, okay? But it's not just Stam Shalach Manis. It's not like they have their Kaviyach Lahavdal Elf Alfei Avdalis, because you have halachas here. You have halachas. There have to be halachas that you have to fulfill. And if there's someone who's an Avelus Le'aleinu, there's a different halachas of Shalach Manis. And we have an entire Seder HaChaim. Our lifestyle is different. And purposefully so. It's not just the mitzvahs of the Torah. It's the dinim derabanan that do that also, that provide us with a structure of our life that's different. Think about this, okay? You walk into a house, okay? Imagine this. Imagine that you were stranded in, I don't know, in Hungary. Okay, that's a pretty random place. You're stranded in Hungary for Shabbos. Okay? You do a little research, and you find that there's a Chabad family there. Okay? Which certainly there is. Okay? And they invite you for Shabbos, which certainly they will. Okay? You walk into their house. What do you think they're going to do first? And you will, I don't know, probably they'll bench their kids. Maybe they'll sing Shalom Aleichem. They'll make Kiddush. They'll wash. They'll eat. Are you kidding? They're from Hungary. How do you know they're going to do that? Because we have a structure to our life, and it's universal. If you go to Turkey, if you go to Syria, today they were from Jews in Syria, they went this week. If you go to anywhere you go, maybe Sfardim, Ashkenazim will do a little bit different. Maybe the Yekis will wash before Kiddush. There might be certain minute things, but we have a structure that's our life. It's our structure of our life. And that's the appreciation that we have for halacha. And certainly we should, and maybe we will focus on it, on trying to take halachas and show the beauty and show the meaning of it. But it's not what we need. What we need is to understand how unbelievably plugged into Ruchnius we are by every action that we do. And what an unbelievable different Seder HaChaim we live. It's not a coincidence. People look at it like, because I have to keep halacha, so it's so inconvenient, So inconvenient you want to go away on a vacation, so you go stay in a hotel somewhere, and you don't have kosher food, so inconvenient. You don't have kosher food, you have to figure it out. You have to take before kosher food, right? And then you show up at a hotel room. You've stayed in a hotel? You show up in a hotel room, so then you have to find the cups there so that you could use for Negelwasser in the morning. That's not why they put them there. You know that, right? They didn't. It doesn't say little, on the airplanes, and El Al's airplanes in the bathrooms, they have these little cases that have like Negelwasser cups, in there. That's not what's going on in the hotel that you go in, right? It's not, it's not like that, because they don't, it's not the Tzura Sachaim. I'll never forget Yossi Orlansky's, you remember we talked about this once? Yossi Orlansky's thesis project when he was in architecture school. No, Mrs. Gottesman, you don't remember? I talked what? A long time ago. Okay, I see you're ready for a chazara. He was becoming an architect. So what he built, I guess for his PhD or whatever it was, I don't know, something for his thesis, I don't know what it was exactly for, but he built on paper. He didn't actually build the house, but he built on paper a Jewish house. And his theory was that it's not the pshat that Jews live in a house and do different things. The house is different. And he did besides the fact that he put like sinks in the rooms and things like that, and he made counters that you could turn over for Pesach, and he did all these cute things, besides for all those things, but he made it in a way that you could keep halacha, like it was like halachically appropriate houses. And he, one of the things I remember that he did was that he had pillars in the house to hold up the house, right? You need supporting walls. So instead of having all the Sfarim in a study, he had throughout the house that wherever there was a pillar, there was bookcases around it. And the idea, even though I think of it like I'd be running all over the house, it would be impossible. But the idea was very unbelievable. His idea was, what are the supports of a Jewish house? Right? That is the Torah. So the supports of the house is where the Sfarim were. Isn't that something? And a lot of things like that in bedrooms and in the parents' bedroom, the children's bedrooms, like to work in all the halachas that it's possible to keep the halachas properly. It's not just that, like, people look at it, people that are struggling a lot of times look at it like we're from, and it creates tremendous inconveniences when we're trying to run our lives. I go on vacation with my wife, but all these things get in the way. Like, I need to wash Negelwasser, I need to get kosher food, I have to find a minyan. It's all these things get in the way of our being able to enjoy ourselves. So if you want to go to some place in South America for vacation, as many do, so you have to kind of figure out how to be Jewish there, and I had someone that I know that was in Mexico or something sent me this shaila. Was like she ordered a drink, and then she found out that the machine that they serve the drink from is used at night for mixed drinks. So she wasn't sure if she's allowed to use it. It's hard to live a frum life out there, and there's different ways to look at it. Sometimes we look at it, it's just like so convenient, some inconvenient sometimes to be from, isn't it? It's just sometimes just so inconvenient, just kind of gets in the way. Someone goes, I know someone who's going to a facility to deal with his childhood trauma. He's going to a facility for a few weeks. Okay, kosher food, Shabbos, tefillin, everything becomes inconvenient. What are you supposed to do? What do you do? How do you deal with that? How many of you have dealt with? You have a baby on Shabbos. How do you get into the hospital? How do you get out of the hospital? What do you do? It's like, the nurses don't get it. This is not Maimonides Hospital in Borough Park, the nurses don't necessarily get it. And this, inconvenience of living our life because we're from, even what I was joking about earlier, on Pesach we have to worry about Chametz. On Sukkot we have to find the sukkah. You have these guys putting up their pop-up sukkahs there outside the amusement park, and the wind is blowing them away, and it's just so inconvenient. And I know that feeling when I was younger, that feeling it would be so nice if we could just go away and just eat the food that's there, and just eat it. Not because I want to eat treif. I just want to just eat the food. I'm taking a flight tomorrow, so I think about it on the airplanes. Okay, when you're flying to Eretz Yisrael, it's a lot of kosher meals, But you have it sometimes that they're giving out the meals, and you get the kosher meal, So it's like you have a disease, It's wrapped up, It's very hygienic, It's wrapped up, and you have to like get a drill to open the packaging, and it's, what it's like, and the other people, it's so convenient, and their meals are always, maybe, is it just me? It always looks fresher and better, always.
It doesn't come out of the freezer.
It's right,
Served on a plate. It just
So yeah, and they, these things, just like, the airport in Tel Aviv used to have one restaurant that was kosher according to most people, but now it doesn't have any. And these people have these lists of what they would do if they were able to violate one halacha. People have these lists. Like, if you were able to do one aveira, what would you do? Like, back in the day, they used to say I would have a cigarette after the chalent. There's like these type of things. What would I do if I could violate one halacha? So my thing is I would eat in an airport. I wouldn't have my little package that I'm opening up, and I would just go eat in an airport. They sit there eating in a restaurant. You ever walk by like, I can't believe it's the airport and they're eating like normal.
Living in Waterbury is like that.
Wow.
When you come from Lakewood and you live in Waterbury, it's like you want to just eat in any restaurant.
Right, it's crazy. I know, it's crazy. And the truth is, it's interesting, is the Waterbury kids, they have this thing. They'll be walking down the aisle, and it happens sometimes to us when we go back to Lakewood, right? So we go to Lakewood, and we're walking down the aisle in Evergreen or Seasons or some supermarket, and your kid is like, "Mommy, does this have a hechsher?" Like, hello, we're in Lakewood, But our kids know that where we live, it's not that way. But I'm trying to bring out a point. The point I'm trying to bring out is that all of this way of thinking is really wrong. It's a wrong way of thinking, and it's worth thinking about this because we'll live much happier lives. We are not from this planet. Of course it doesn't fit. We have a neshama. We live a different life. We're not living in this world, and we have, unfortunately, these inconvenient responsibilities that we have to do. It's like we act sometimes towards our frumkeit like as if we have a bad allergy. No, don't we act that way? Like, I'm sorry, I'm allergic to all nuts, so I can't eat in this restaurant. Like, it's like, that's how we act. And we shouldn't act that way. And we shouldn't feel that way. We have the honor of living a godly life. And this is not a godly world. It is a godly world, but the way the people live on this world is not in a godly way. And we have the honor of living a life where we have to carve out an existence of ruchnius in a physical world. And when you're in that hotel in the middle of nowhere, and you realize that you forgot to bring, I don't know what, something that you wanted to let's say you're Makban Achal of Yisrael, let's say. Okay? And you wake up in the morning in some random hotel somewhere in the middle of nowhere, and you realize, I don't have milk. And you have to figure it out. You live a different... This is not an allergy. This is not like some kind of medical restriction. This is, I live a different life. I'm a spiritual person. And I live a spiritual life. And I make believe in this world that I'm kind of fitting into this world, but I don't fit in. I daven to a God that no one could see. I wash my hands when my hands aren't dirty. I say blessings before I eat, and when I'm finished eating, and when I come out of the restroom, I say a blessing, because everything is holy in my world. I guard my tznius in a manner that the world doesn't even begin to understand. I maintain certain standards that are standards that I was taught by the creator, I can't get the words out, by the creator of the world. That's whose standard. That's not an allergy. That's an opportunity. I get to live the Eila HaMishpata. This week's parsha, getting back to what we started with, that we transition from the stories of our emunah to the halachos. These halachos are the way of life that Hashem gave us. We're not from here. And what Yossi Olansky did was right. Our homes, we live in these, most of us anyway, live in these 100-year-old houses in Waterbury. Okay, I'm not talking about Blue Ridge, which is 10-year-old houses, but like we live in like these houses. It was so amazing to me. Like I remember the first week that this Shabbos, the Bekritskis made a Shalom Zachar soon after they moved into the house that they live in now. And the house that they moved into was a house that was owned by an old Waterbury, like from the Waterbury royalty, the Waterbury elite. Okay, there was a desk in the attic where he found a letter that was written to one of the presidents or from a president. Okay, like it was a very chashuv. Okay, very chashuv. And very shortly after they moved into the house, they made a Shalom Zachar. And I remember walking in there, and it was a real Connecticut house. You know where there's no chandeliers or lights anywhere? You remember that, right? Everything is like plugged-in lights. You know, it was like before that, everyone did a little work here and there to like mechadesh, that there should be a light at the ceiling. You know, and the house, if Yossi Orlansky's house was a Jewish house, this was a Goyish house, okay? You know, the kitchen wasn't built from people, and of course they changed it and they did it and they made it do a beautiful job like everyone did. But I spoke for a few minutes by the Shalom Zachar, and I was like, look what's going on here. In this house, a Shalom Zachar, who would have thought? This was like the king of the Goyim, okay? This was like, you can't imagine how detached from this Seder Eloiki this house was. And here we are singing songs late on a Friday night with L'chaims and Mazel Tovs. It's just like mind-boggling, you know? And that's what we do to this world. That's what we do to this world. And when we try to wash our negelvassers and make sure we wash our bread, and some people work among goyim and they have to make their hamaitzi and wash on bread when the goyim are there. And then they have to figure out how to bench. Like, excuse me, I'm not. It's going to look like I'm talking to you, but it won't be. I'm not going to be talking to you. You know, but we have to do these things, and we have to leave early on Erev Shabbos, and then we have asking a guy to do something on Shabbos, right? You know, which is the most fun when we go to the guy and we say, hi, I live over here. I left the air conditioner on. And the guy's like, good for you. You know, right? Have you been there? Right? We're trying to no, it would really be amazing if my air conditioner was off. Good idea for you. Turn it off. Have a good day. You know, we live a different life. And part of our job, going into Parshas Mishpatim, of course, we're going to start talking about Purim soon at Pesach. We'll do that as well. But part of the job, when the parsha is full of halachas, part of the job is to appreciate that we live a different life. Let's try to do that when we feel restricted. You ever stop off on the highway and there's just like, what are you supposed to buy? You know, you want to get something nutritious, something, what could you buy in a gas station? Things like that. We're just in Lakewood. You could buy a 9-course meal in a gas station, but here you can't do that, and a little bit we do that sometimes. We have this resentful feeling of as if we have an allergy. I'm restricted by my Yidishkeit. What could I do? It would be very nice if I didn't have to have these restrictions, but nebuch, I have these restrictions. And that's our job. Parshas Mishpatim, our job is to enthusiastically embrace our halachas. I'm saying this mussar to myself as well, because I drive back and forth all the time, and from time to time I stop. I'm getting tired, so I pull over on the 95 and the rest stop, and I'm walking around, and I don't know why I think this time I'm going to find something I never found before, that I could eat, It's always the same, but it's always the same thing, What? Yeah, that's an interesting novel idea, But it's always the same thing, and of course right out of the store everyone's sitting and eating their meals, and and it's important for us to be mechazek ourselves, and I'm going to end with this, to be mechazek ourselves. This is what this share is about, that our Yiddishkeit is not an allergy. It's a way of life. It's a godly way of life. It's an opportunity that we have. It's fulfilling to ourselves like a bird flying is to, because it has wings. Imagine if a bird's wings were clipped, how bad you feel for that bird, that it can't fly. And if we couldn't do our Seder of our Yiddishkeit, we would be a bird that can't fly. And Baruch Hashem, we have the ability. Baruch Hashem, we live in a country, we're very grateful, we live in a country that allows us to keep all the mitzvahs. It wasn't always that simple. And we have the ability to do that, to embrace without resentment or without the sense of schleppiness. This is what we do. This is our Seder. This is what we do. This is the structure of our life. We love it. We're not pushing against it. We're ready to accept this Seder Eloiki, this godly life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave us. Take care. Thank you very, very much. Yeshikaya.
Thank you.
There's a TV show of
I want to ask you something after.
people reenacting Jewish